Consider for a moment that instead of a line, time moves in a circle, or from another angle, a spiral. Consider all the actions you've made in your life, all of the thoughts you've had, all of the relationships you have nurtured, all of the loved ones you have lost. Now consider the fact that all of this, every aspect of your life, and everything you consider to be yourself, exists within the context of the land which is currently beneath your feet. The air you breathe, the bed in which you sleep, the last food you ate. All of this exists in complete interdependence with the land on which supports you, even now. Naturally, this interdependence extends both backwards and forwards along the direction of time, spiraling in both directions, weaving this current moment into a tapestry of interlocking moments, which all give context to one another. While this way of understanding of space and time might be different from how you see things, this is fundamental for many people all around the world. And this way of seeing changes our relationships to one another, to our environment, and to ourselves. For some people, there's little separation between the three. These different ways of experiencing the world has led to the major differences with how we remember the past, see the present, and imagine the future. From here, we can also see how we find ourselves in the current climate crisis. When studying the causes of climate change, the words anthropogenic and Anthropocene come up. This anthro prefix lumps together all human cultures when this really shouldn't be the case. As Indigenous scholars and allies demonstrate, our current climate crisis is rooted in colonialism. Colonialism refers to a form of domination in which at least one society seeks to exploit some set of benefits believed to be found in the territory of one or more other societies. Indigenous peoples refer to the roughly 400 million persons worldwide who, prior to a period of invasion, colonialization, or settlement, exercised collective self-determination according to their own cultural, cosmological, and political systems. It has been proposed that the name of our current epoch should be named the Anthropocene, commemorating humanity's impact on the Earth's state. For geologists, time is divided up by the distinct shifts in the Earth's geological state. In just the same way that one might count the years in the many rings of a tree, geologists look back into the layers of rock and mineral formation in the Earth. They break down these layers into chunks of time, periods, eras, and epochs. The Anthropocene Working Group voted to mark the 1950s as the start date of the Anthropocene, coinciding with the great acceleration of humanity's impact. However, to mark that span of time as the beginning would effectively diminish the tremendous impact of widespread colonialism and its destruction of both indigenous populations and their relations. Rather than marking the beginning of the Anthropocene at the Great Acceleration, or when humanity's impact on the world began to become symptomatic, many Indigenous scholars suggest the start date to be moved 350 years earlier, to 1610. Known as the Orbis Spike, this is a time that shows a major decrease in carbon dioxide levels with the arrival of Europeans in the Americas. There are two reasons for the Orbis Spike. The first was due to the major reshaping of ecosystems brought about by the exchange of animals and plants, as well as the changed relationship between Indigenous peoples' practices and the ecosystem. The second reason is due to the actual genocide of Indigenous peoples and the regrowth of forests and other plant life. In 1492, there was an estimated 54 to 61 million peoples in the Americas, and by 1650, there were 6 million. With the deaths of around 50 million people, and some researchers believe that estimate is low, this genocide effectively severed relationships between the lands, waters, and stewards. Many Indigenous scholars wonder if climate change is a sort of déjà vu of colonialism. The Orbis Spike caused a rift in time that continues to dramatically damage Indigenous peoples' relations, from their culture to health to self-determination. This rampant period of colonialism made way for free market capitalism, industrialization, and subsequent acceleration of anthropogenic climate change, which we are faced with today as a global community. For many Indigenous peoples, the beginning of time starts with their creation story, whereas the colonial narrative begins at colonialization. This is considered a timescale of at least 10,000 years versus just over 400. That's the experience of a 100-year-old to a 4-year-old. This cultural identity stretches for millennia, so planning for the future involves thinking many generations ahead, and colonialism is relatively recent from an Indigenous perspective. And although people are adaptable to changes in the environment, There's been too much rapid and catastrophic change to the indigenous ways of life that it has taken a tremendous amount of resilience just to survive. Some say that if we were to ask their ancestors, they would say that their descendants alive today are already in post-apocalyptic times, being that 90 to 95% of their societies were destroyed. As researchers study climate change and its effects, there has been growing recognition among the community to include traditional ecological knowledge. Also known as indigenous or local knowledge, these are scientific frameworks that broadly refer to indigenous communities' ways of knowing, that both guide and result from their community members' close relationships with and responsibilities to the landscapes, waterscapes, plants, fungi, and animals that are vital to the flourishing of indigenous culture. Accumulated through experience, relationships, and upheld responsibilities towards other living beings and places, and are passed down generationally from elder to youth through oral histories, stories, ceremonies, and land management practices. These traditional knowledges are considered by many to be a gift and come with certain responsibilities, such as determining when and with whom they should be shared. Dan Wildcat termed the word indigenuity, indigenous ingenuity, as the ability to solve pressing life issues facing humankind by situating our solutions in earth-based, local indigenous spatial knowledge. For climate change studies, traditional knowledges are important to put at the forefront when responding to issues from the changing environment, as they are the responses which have been evolving for millennia.